So we're back with Antoine and Henry here for Team Rising. So we talked about how the candidates did at the debate. Now let's talk about how the media did in their coverage of the debate. I mean, I find that there is, to your point a bit, Antoine, there is a fixation on some of these moments and some of these stylistic things that do not actually matter to the public. Right. And the public, consistently, I feel like with these debates, who the pundits said won and who the public said won were very different.
It's totally different. That's why Joe Biden is still the front runner. Look, they've been writing his political benediction since the first debate. And when every one of these candidates have a moment, they try to use that as if it's going to be a certain movement. It was the same thing on the Republican side in 2016, Henry. And so this is not anything different. And that's why people have this distrust, or people press the ignore and chill button when it comes to the media and the bubble, because it's a big disconnect. The coastal elites and the Washington elites is different.
It's the same thing. Everyone's like, oh, Bernie Sanders' voice or whatever. You look at this poll, 538 that we were just talking about earlier. I mean,
he did fine.
He did fine. Nobody is supporters are going.
I hate all the media who cover all that stuff. It's like his voice. He was on a stepping stool and stuff. You know, blah blah blah. Look, if you look at the polling, people don't care about that stuff at all. They really don't. And they really just care about what policy issues they're talking about. They want to hear what these candidates are going to do moving forward. And that's about all they care about. They do love a good little spat on stage. They do love a little bit, but even then,
But listen, for the people who watch the debates, because keep in mind, not everybody's paying attention at the work. For the people who watch it, they want to know, are you consistent with what you're saying when you come to our communities, right? And say what you want. I know everyone does not agree with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who maybe think like I think from a center-left approach, but they are very message disciplined. And they speak to the people who support them. That's why they've maintained their their second and third place respectively. And Biden does the same thing. He speaks to older voters who he knows his body work, and he speaks to their issues, and that's why he's maintained his front runner status.
And what specifically brought this up for me is I was looking at the New York Times rankings of all the candidates post-debate, and they thought that Warren did great. Everybody thought the media loves Warren. Everybody loves Warren. Warren did great, right? And she did. But they put Sanders, they put Kamala second, and they put Sanders and Yang very much near the bottom, which we spoke with a group that did a poll of college students right after. They found Warren, Sanders, and Yang were the people that they liked the most. And I've spoken with the Yang campaign. They have had more traffic to their campaign than they've ever had before. So once again, why are you giving him the lowest rating out of all the candidates?
What debate were you watching?
I find that Kamala is number 2. It's just egregiously untrue.
I think why people gave Kamala high marks for this debate, she stayed focused on Donald Trump. And say what you want, that has been the number one thing that's on the minds of voters, beating Donald Trump. And she was very consistent of aiming all her ammunition towards Donald Trump and separating the differences between her and him. Because that's the thing that Joe Biden started his campaign doing, and that has kept him successful. I think that's why people.
But to say that Andrew Yang had a bad night is ridiculous to me. I mean, I think he had the best night out of all nights that he's had. And I mean, he was walking around the spin room like he had just won the election. That guy was happier than anyone I'd seen. I mean, he was talking to the media for hours.
Name ID,
and he was
he got 100,000 people's contact information.
And he knew he did well. So I just find that
he did well because he was able to do something different to separate himself from the noise, from the noise in the bubble. Like, he literally was speaking to needs and concerns that people have. For $1,000 a month for me, that's student loan payment. So I could use the extra $1,000 a month. And you think about somebody, forget about trying to make ends meet, they're putting two ends together, hoping they meet, an extra $1,000 will go a long way.
That may make the big difference.
The way that they analyze these things is ridiculous. Like Kamala and Cory Booker and Mayor Pete in the top 5. I mean, there's a reason these people are not polling where they're polling. It's because they're all over the map. What is Kamala actually for? What is Mayor Pete actually for? Cory Booker, what is the point of your entire candidacy? These are things which, it's like you were saying, Antoine, everybody knows why Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden are running for president. Nobody really knows why these other people. And if you watch that debate, they did not make that case. There was no case made. I mean, at this point, at a certain point, when do you think people are going to begin to drop out? Because the clock is ticking in terms of money.
I think at this point, people will try to get to February. Obviously.
Why February?
February. obviously the caucus start, but South Carolina. I think past South Carolina, you would see the field start to get slim and trim because they won't have the resources or the momentum to compete in Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday is a big,
it's expensive.
It's big.
Well, and on the media conversation, they always, with Sanders, the only thing they can say about him is, oh, he's angry or he's grumpy or he's cranky. And of course, with his voice hoarse, that was all that they could fixate on. Meanwhile, this moment, very real, absolutely heartbreaking moment from Sanders in Nevada really captured the public's attention. Let's take a look.
Now they're saying that, I didn't re-sign or do something or something.
How are you going to pay off?
I can't. I'm going to kill myself.
Hold on, John. Stop it. You're not going to kill yourself. All right,
I can't deal with this. I have Huntington's disease. Do you know how hard that is? You probably don't, do you? I can't drive. I can barely take care of myself.
All right, let's start later at the end of the meeting, okay? Okay.
Now, this is reality. This man, who, by the way, is a veteran, $139,000 in medical debt. As if it's not hard enough to struggle with Huntington's disease, he now has to wonder about how he can financially survive and is telling Bernie Sanders that he is thinking of killing himself. And meanwhile, all the media, Henry, can fixate on is Bernie Sanders' voice being hoarse, rather than which healthcare plan is going to make that man whole.
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, that was very moving, and I just had the goosebumps watching that, honestly. I've criticized Bernie Sanders a lot in the past, but I mean, that's just a true moment. You can't criticize, and he needs to do more stuff. He needs to show voters how he's a real person and he's not an angry politician. And
he's got reason to be angry. This is the reason that he's angry.
And he does, and you're right, and he does, but he just needs to get that message across better. And this was very moving.
Can't make the media pay attention to this kind of stuff. What do you think, Antoine?
This is the period to the end of the sentence that I always talk about when there's a big disconnect. And while people want to cover Joe Biden's the way he explains certain things or something he did in the 1960s or 70s, he's speaking to issues for people like that. Same thing with Bernie Sanders and that kind of thing. And that's the disconnect. And that's why when you find the polls the way they are and people wonder, it's because the media doesn't understand what to cover. And it's arguably why Donald Trump is the president. It's arguably why he has been able to dominate the coverage the way he has. He's been able to change the game. And I think until we get in the business of finding out what's on the hearts and minds of regular people, then there will always be this disconnect and people won't trust the media.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Tomorrow on Rising, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley weighs in on the latest antitrust investigations into big tech.
And actresses Vanessa and Laura Morano share their efforts to combat human trafficking, including their latest film, Saving Zoe. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hill TV Live. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and send in your questions for our Rising Q's segment. Use the hashtag RisingQs so that we can find them on Twitter. Have a fabulous day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.